After 4 years as Israel's ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren now serves as a deputy minister for diplomacy in the Israeli government. Oren, an Israeli lawmaker for the centrist Kulanu party, is responsible for public diplomacy, such as explaining how the Israeli government has been trying to pull Russia away from Iran in Syria's conflict. Israeli Deputy Minister for Diplomacy Michael Oren, thank you for speaking to Voice of America's Persian service today.
Pleasure to be with VOA, always.
On the subject of Syria, how is Israel trying to persuade Russia right now to get Iranian forces out of that country?
Well, we have a very close relationship and open channels with Russia. Between 1 out of every 5, 1 out of every even 7 Israelis speak Russian. We have close commercial relationships. Russia is very much interested in our natural gas. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has developed a close relationship with President Putin. Now, having said that, we've had divergent interest in Syria, where the Russians have been backing the regime of Bashar al-Assad, which is also backed by the Iranian regime. Israel has stayed out of the war. We have offered humanitarian aid to thousands and thousands of wounded from Syria, but we haven't been involved in that. We have one major concern in Syria, which is that the Iranian military not be enabled or allowed to transform Syria into a forward military base that would house missiles and be used in an attempt to destroy us, which is the expressed intention and declaration of the Iranian regime. So we do our utmost to maintain our military maneuverability so that our Air Force and other forces can act against the Iranian attempt to establish itself militarily in Syria. But we have to do it in a way that we're not going to get into a clash with Russia. Not easy. It's not a huge airspace. So we maintain a daily contact at the level of deputy chiefs of staff. Again, very open channels with one another. And so far, we have not had a direct clash between Israeli forces and Russian military personnel in Syria. We will continue to do our utmost to prevent that. We have no interest whatsoever in a military confrontation with Russia.
Well, as you know, there was a recent incident in which Israeli forces carried out an airstrike in Syria. The Syrian anti-aircraft fire, according to the Israelis, downed a Russian plane, and Russia was quite upset. How much would you say this incident has set back the Israeli desire to have a good connection with Russia in Syria?
Actually, the Russians don't deny that the Syrians shot down the plane. And there's been different messages coming out of Russia about it. One time, President Putin said that it was a tragic accident. It was, in fact, a tragic accident. It has not diminished in any way our desire to avoid a military confrontation with Russia, our commitment, in fact, to avoid any type of clashes with Russia. And again, we will continue to do our absolute utmost to, on one hand, prevent Iran from establishing itself militarily in Syria, from transforming Syria into a forward base against us, but at the same time, avoid any type of confrontation with the Russians.
One thing that Russia has done very recently is they've actually provided an advanced air defense system. They've actually transferred such a system into Syria. How concerned is the Israeli government about this new system being in Syria and the potential that it could complicate Israeli operations there?
We've long tried to dissuade the Russians from supplying the S-300 anti-aircraft system to either Iran and or Syria. And we were disappointed that after this airplane incident in which the Syrians shot down a Russian plane, that Russia would then turn around and against our will, supply the S-300 to Syria. S-300 is one of the world's most advanced anti-aircraft systems. It will pose a challenge, but not an insurmountable challenge. Israel has been overcoming such challenges since the day of its creation in 1948. We'll overcome this one as well if we are so forced to do so.
How do you see the Syrian conflict panning out at this stage? Because it does look like Assad and his allies are close to clearing out the last rebel strongholds in the country.
Well, Syria as we knew it before 2011 will no longer exist. Yes, Assad has succeeded in overwhelming the Sunni rebels in many places, but a third of the country is under the control of the Turkish army today. United States forces occupy a very strategic part of Syria. It's not the same Syria anymore. And ultimately, I think there'll be a breakdown of the temporary confluence of interests between Iran in Russia. And one of the points we are always emphasizing to President Putin that if he wants stability in Syria, that stability cannot be assured as long as Iran is trying to establish itself militarily there, because Israel has no choice, has to operate against those Iranian military installations and missile sites. And so if Russia wants stability, Russia itself has to work to rid the country of Iranian forces.
The Iranian government says that its forces are there at the invitation of the Syrian government. Do you think that Israel might somehow have to persuade the Assad government at some point to ask the Iranians to leave?
Well, I think it's more or less what we're doing right now, because I think Assad also has an interest in stabilizing Syria. And Israel has made it, I think, unequivocally clear that as long as Iran continues to try to establish itself militarily in Syria, then Syria will know no stability.
On a different topic, in terms of the Iran nuclear dispute, the United States, of course, is introducing additional sanctions in early November targeting the Iranian energy sector. What does Israel think the United States should do after that point in terms of pressuring Iran?
Well, I think that the United States is on the right course. We are strongly supportive of these sanctions. We agree with the 12 points set out by Secretary of State Pompeo, which means an end to Iran's status as being the world's leading sponsor of world terror, an end to Iranian involvement in Syria, an end to attempts to destroy us, among others. We're strongly supportive of that. Our hope is that the Iranian regime will internalize the message that as long as it is supporting terror, as long as it is sowing discord, instability in the Middle East, killing tens of thousands of Middle Easterners and trying to destroy us, that Iran cannot have a healthy economy, it cannot be part of the international community in a full way, and that the Iranian regime will then return to the negotiating table and negotiate a new nuclear deal, which will address not only terror, but the issue of international ballistic system that the Iranian regime has developed. And Iran will also have to come clean for the first time fully about its military nuclear program.
What do you think are the chances that the Iranian government will respond to this additional pressure by entering into negotiations on a new deal as President Trump wants them to do?
Well, put it this way. Without the sanctions, there's zero chance. With very heavy sanctions, I think there's an appreciable chance. I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you for certain, but it is our hope. Israel and Iran long had a very, very friendly relationship. We had a deep friendship between the Israeli people and the people of Iran, and we would very much look forward to a day when that friendship, that type of amity and closeness could be restored.
On that note, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing some outreach to Iran over the past year, issuing the occasional video message on Twitter, on his social media channels. As a deputy minister in the Prime Minister's office, what kind of response have you all seen from Iran to this kind of outreach?
A very positive response, actually quite surprisingly positive. People writing in the new media, and again, it's not easy to write in the new media without endangering oneself because of the Iranian regime, has been overwhelmingly supportive. And I know that in my previous capacity as Israel's ambassador in the United States, I often reached out to the Iranian community in the United States. I actually held an Iranian dinner at my house with Iranian music, because the Jewish community in the United States is very close to the Iranian community, and I'm not talking about just Iranian Jews. I'm talking about Iranian Muslims, and there's always been that historical affinity. We look forward to the day when it can become formal and diplomatic as well.
When Israel sends these kind of messages to Iran, the Iranian government, might look at that and just perceive that as the Israelis trying to instigate some kind of revolt, revolution. Does Israel ultimately want to see this current government toppled and replaced by something else? What are you going for?
I would like to see the Iranian government completely changed. So an Iranian government, an Iranian regime that no longer supports terror, that is no longer trying to conquer the Middle East, is no longer developing intercontinental ballistic missiles, that is no longer trying to destroy us and then lying about his nuclear program on top of everything else, that's a different regime entirely. And that would be the choice of the Iranian people. As long as that government, that is Iranian rulers, are not threatening us, not threatening the Middle East and threatening the world, that would be fine.
One positive side effect that Prime Minister Netanyahu has talked about in terms of the Iran nuclear deal that he opposed is Israel developing closer relations with Sunni Arab nations, which see, along with Israel, a threat from Iran. How is this closer relationship manifesting itself?
Well, right, most of the manifestation is beneath the surface, beneath the radar. These are not formal relationships, but I think that the Sunni Arab states of the Gulf in particular, which formerly viewed us as an enemy country, now view us not only as not an enemy, they view us as an ally and a crucial ally. That Israel is essential for stability in the Middle East, and the Iranian regime represents instability in the Middle East. And again, there are other issues that have to come to the fore. My hope is that we'll be able to reach some kind of reconciliation on the Palestinian issue as well, and that would open the door to more formal relationships. But right now we are, in fact, united against a common threat, and that threat comes out of Tehran.
Could you give any examples of nations with which Israel is having slightly better relations, even very low-level or informal ones, or do you still have to keep all of this under the radar in terms of not naming any country?
No, I think that, for example, with the United Arab Emirates, we've had an increasingly open relationship with business people going back and forth, intersections. I think that the tremendous opportunity here, and I think this is an historic opportunity, is the wedding of Israeli technology, because we are the world's leading innovators, with Middle Eastern resources. I would hope that someday would include Iranian resources, which could be transformative not just for the Middle East, but for the entire world.
Just to kind of wrap up, what would your message be to the Iranian people today?
We miss you. We miss you. We have been good friends, not just in our recent history, we've been good friends for 2,500 years. It was the Persian king who enabled us to come back out of exile and rebuild our temple. And we have Persian words in our vocabulary. One of the prettiest words in Hebrew is the word for orange grove, which is pardes, which is a Persian word, which means paradise. That's where we get the word paradise in English. So it's a very important word for us too. So deeply influenced by your culture, and we all look forward to a day when we can once again be friends and neighbors and historic allies.
Israeli Deputy Minister Michael Oren, thank you for speaking to VOA today.
My pleasure. Thank you.